Welcome, swimmers and swimmers. I'm today's host, Garrett McCaffrey. And joining us today is the 2019 ASCA and Golden Goggles Coach of the Year. From 1987 to 2006, as well as 2015 to 2019, he's been on the USA Swimming National Team Coaches list. He's also a member of the ASCA Hall of Fame. He's the head coach of Riptide Swim Team, Mike Parratto, and this is the SwimSwam Podcast. Mike, thanks so much for making the time for us today.
Hi, Garrett. Thank you. Really look forward to today and having a chat with you.
Me too. I really look forward to it as well. And, we have a lot of things in common, not only the coaching side, but also a common media major. Let's start at the beginning of your career, I guess. And at Eastern Illinois, you swam and you were communications and media major. When you first started that major, what were you hoping to grow up to be, I guess?
Right. When I was at school, I was on the school newspaper there at EIU, and they had a daily, a 20-page daily that normally got the AP and UPI awards, and I really wanted to be part of that. I liked writing. I took a lot of journalism courses, of course, and I essentially wanted to be hooked up with a newspaper, specifically in sports. So at the school, they had a job placement center. And you would go there and they would, try to help you line up with some internships and things like that. And, what were your choices in order? And of course, I wanted to, talk about sports media. And then down the line a little bit, I put swim coach because I had some experience doing some of that at the summer club level and at EIU a little bit with the club team. And I decided at some point, and I could tell you how that happened. I came out of college and I got a job. My parents were living in Florida. I got a job in West Palm Beach with a boxing promotions company. And my job was to be a liaison between with the radio stations and TV stations and newspapers and the boxing community. And that was quite the experience for me. I specifically remember going down to Miami Convention Center to cover boxing matches. It was wild and crazy. And that was a time when you sat at ringside. And this was circa 1981, right? And I'm sitting there with my typewriter because that's what we had then. So anyway, I had that job for a while, and we were promoting a very big bout that was coming to West Palm Beach. And you may not know these boxers, but there were 10 different boxing matches that were on this boxing card. And the headliner was a heavyweight fight with Jimmy Young, who was one of the top heavyweights at that time. And so I guess in training, Jimmy Young had broken his hand or his thumb in training. So the guy that hired me says, all right, well, the card's been canceled because that's the big headliner. And because of that, no one in the office got paid. Well, I needed to get paid. I needed to pay my rent. I walked out of the building and I went down to the street level and I went to a phone booth. Remember those? And I called up Jack Nelson, who was the head swim coach at Fort Lauderdale Swim Club, and I knew him. And I called him up. I said, Jack, do you have any jobs? He says, I don't really have any jobs for you, but I know there's some in the area. And he helped me out. And so I started coaching. and I found my way eventually up to Boston. I worked with the Gator Swim Club for a couple of years. And then in the fall of 1984, my wife, Amy, and I took the job at Seacoast Swimming. It was called the Seacoast Stingrays at the time. And within a year, I think we changed the team to the Seacoast Swimming Association. So we changed the name. My wife started a diving program. We had an assistant coach. His name was Phil Baker. He coached our junior level group. He was a triathlete as well. He coached our master's program, and I was the senior coach. So there's 3 of us in this program. And Phil went on to coach what's called the Portland Porpoise Swim Club in Portland, Maine. That club eventually turned out Ian Crocker. So pretty cool.
Wow.
That's a short story all the way from the time I graduated till the time I got to Seacoast.
Yeah. At what point did you kind of give up on the journalism piece of it?
As soon as I walked downstairs to that phone booth. So I pretty much, I love swimming, and I loved working with swimmers, and I never went back into the sports media area. But before I got to that job in West Palm Beach, that's a boxing promotions company, my internship was at a Philadelphia radio station. So I was an intern there. That was my last semester at EIU. I worked at this radio station. First sports intern they've had, working for a gentleman named Merrill Reese, who is the play-by-play man for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he still is. I think he's close to 80, if he's not 80 already. And I got to cover professional basketball, football, ice hockey. That particular year, the NC2A tournament, the Final Four was in the city. And that was an amazing experience for me. I learned a lot, and the boxing promotions company job was my first and last position in that area.
Yeah. I mean, I could see how you could get drawn in that direction just based on those events alone. But I think the coaching bug, so to speak, had always been in you because you swam for a bunch of legendary coaches. How much do you think that impacted your decision there? And then, if you don't mind, kind of going through Don Sonia, Bruce Wigo, Paul Bergen, Mike Burton as kind of influences on your coaching right now. If you could just talk a little bit about your experience as a swimmer with them.
Absolutely. I think my first experience is the area where I grew up, in Middle Atlantic area, in the Philadelphia area, and there were just great teams and coaches. Frank Keefe was at Suburban Swim Club. Eventually, it went to Foxcatcher. Dick Schulberg was at Germantown Academy. George Breen was at Vesper Boat Club. Bob Matson was at Wilmington Aquatic Club. And I got to see these great coaches with their great swimmers as an age group kid, and eventually as a senior swimmer. Don Sonia, I had a number of age group coaches at a place called the Philadelphia Aquatic Club. It was a rather big team in Middle Atlantic, and eventually got into Coach Sonia's group. Coach Don was a fun guy. He was awesome. We worked hard, but he was always challenging us. I think when I swam there, this was the situation. It was a 55-yard pool. The female swimmers were at one end of the pool with Mary Williams. Her husband owned the team, and she was a great swim coach, and she coached the women. And at the other end of the pool were the guys in the senior group, and he had a couple lanes of 11 and 12s, a couple lanes of 13, 14, a couple lanes of 15 and 16 and 17, 18. And so it seemed like every other day or every third day he would get us on the block and time us. And so he got the little guys on the blocks, and we were the 12 and unders, and this is my first experience with Coach Sonia. And he's walking up to everybody, asking them their best time. And he comes up to me and he says, "Parratto, what is your best time in the 100 free?" And I, said 101, like I was a little embarrassed. He goes, "No one in my group goes over a minute in 100 free." So we did the time trial. Damn, 57. I went to 57. The next week there was a swim meet. I went to swim the 100 free, 101. So I wasn't sure if he told me the truth or he just scared me to death that day.
It seems like, other than the scare you to death part, you say he's fun. You say you got up and raced quite often.
A lot.
This is totally a stereotypical perspective, but that doesn't seem typical for the coaches of his era.
There, in between all of that, there were 10 400 IMs. So
There it
in
is.
between
There it
getting
is.
up on the block and racing, it seemed every other day, there was some good work in between those days.
Talk about some of the other coaches that you were influenced by.
Um, I didn't, Bruce Wigo, he came to the team. I think Mrs. Williams coached us for a while after Don Sonia. And then Bruce came in for a short amount of time, and his influence was more on the sprinting side. He came from the New Jersey area, a local guy. He was a younger coach for sure. And I just remember thinking, he really helped me in my fly swimming at that time. And a lot of things were, again, sprint oriented. And we, just kept a great relationship with Bruce all through the years, especially with his time at the Swimming Hall of Fame, being there. And he's still there, and he still writes about swimming history, which is really great. So I love speaking with Bruce when I get a chance to do that. The other coach is I'll talk about Mike Burton first. Mike was on the other side of what Bruce was doing, and Mike was a tough guy. I mean, we know about Mike and his gold medal swims in the 1500 in 1968, 1972. He was also a gold medal winner in the 400 free in 68 in Mexico. And he came to us, I think, in his late 20s, maybe he was 30 years old. He was a school teacher when he actually set the world record in 72 in the 1500. But he came to us, and there was a lot of freestyle that went on. There was a great influence from the coaches that he had, namely Sherm Shavar from Arden Hills. And we just did a lot of hard training. And you had to be a tough guy in his group. He really wanted you to get after it. And there were specific sets that were, they were half twos. So there was a lot of fast freestyle going on, and a lot of it. So it's the 70s, right? If a lot was good, more was better. And we did a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the legends of, his Olympic race and all the other, highlights of his career. Were you aware of that as he came to coach you all?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And he was, we were all starstruck, I think, when he walked on the pool deck with us. But he was a great guy, down to earth guy. He really preached hard work. That was a big deal. He was amazingly generous. I mean, I remember him coming out with some of his Olympic gear, and I remember walking away with one of his Olympic bags that he had been given and things like that. So he was really a great influence and motivation to, hey, here's a guy that was an Olympian. He knew what to do. He had great coaches that helped, that helped him become that level. And Mike kind of taught us in that same way.
Let's move forward to your time at Seacoast. And
well, I can tell you about Mr. Bergen too.
Okay, I didn't know if you wanted to skip over that part, or if not.
No, not at all. I saved that for last, actually.
Please.
Because Coach Bergen was the first coach. He came in, I want to say, 1973, 74 in our program, and he helped us all become better, without a doubt. He was the first coach that I remember walking in with a plan. He had a daily workout in writing for us. And he challenged us like no one to that point. Mike Burton came after Paul in our program, but he challenged us like no one else challenged us before on a daily basis. And one of my fun stories this is the first time I'd ever experienced this. I think I was probably 15 years old at the time, and it's 4th of July, and we're going to have a 4th of July practice. And as we were getting into the parking lot and walking into the facility door, he was standing there with a marker. And we never saw him outside in the parking lot before. He was always in the pool area. But as every other kid that walked in the door got initials on their arm. You were either the Ben Franklins or the BFs, or you're the Thomas Jeffersons, TJ. And every other kid that walked in got those initials on their arm. So we warmed up and we didn't know what was going on. We just thought, well, that's just a 4th of July thing, you know, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson's historical stuff on 4th of July. And we did about 3,000 meters warm up. And then he told us that we were doing a 10,000 for time, and that he would score it like a cross country meet. So low score wins. So it'd be, if you were first, you got 1 point. If you're second, it's 2 points, and you were swimming for your team. So we started the 10,000, and all I remember thinking to myself as a 15-year-old was all I wanted to do was, I don't know, get a hot dog and enjoy that day. And I was getting, it took a while for me to get through that 10,000 that day.
Yeah, I mean, as it would most people, 10,000, 13,000 on the day plus warm down. Happy 4th of July.
He was an amazingly organized coach. He had, like I said, he'd walk in with the workout, and he really taught us how to break down swim races. So here's the splits you need to get this time. What do you need to do here? What are we going to do in practice to achieve that? And then we would go out and do that process of trying to get those times. So he was a great coach. And then, of course, we all know he moved on to Nashville and coached Tracy Calkins there.
Yeah. And probably impacted more coaches who are successful today than most coaches in history. He's got quite the coaching tree too. So, all right, now let's kind of move forward to the start of probably, you know, one of the most impactful portions of your career. I mean, it was 26 years, so a huge portion of your time was spent in New Hampshire at Seacoast. But while you were developing the club and the success that, you know, the club was going towards, can you just talk a little bit about the early years and what those years look like and some of the challenges when, you know, you're a young coach and, you know, trying to build a team towards the greatness that eventually ended up happening?
Yeah, my wife and I started there in 1984, the fall of 84. We were 24 and 25 years old, so we were the head coaches of the team. And the team was pretty much a state team. They were in a state league, New Hampshire State League, swimming league. And the team started, there were 2 teams that worked out of the same facility. One was called the East Coast Aquatic Club, and the other one was called the Dover Bluefins. And that team became the Seacoast Stingrays. And eventually, when we got there, the name of the team changed to Seacoast Swimming, that we had Seacoast Swimming Association. We decided it would be that, just to change the thought process of what we would like to become. And when we got there, the team had 5 practices a week from 4 to 6. And evidently, you could come anytime you wanted to during that time. It didn't matter what your age was, didn't matter what your level was. It was the opportunity to swim on a team. So I remember that within the first week or so, we had this meeting outside of the pool facility on the grass, and I asked all the 10 and unders sit over here, the 11 and 12 sit over here in a group, the 13 and over sit over here, and I had the parents stand behind them, and I said, all right, so here's what's going to happen. In a week or so, there's going to be a schedule of when you come to practice. So it won't be any time between Monday and Friday, whenever you feel like it. We'll have an actual schedule. And, you know, the 10 and unders will be here 3 days a week. The junior group will be here, depending on their level, 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. And the senior group will go 5 or 6 times a week, or 5 times a week, because we only had 5 at that time. We didn't have Saturdays yet. And so I explained how this would be sent out in the mail, because, of course, that's what we needed to do at that point. And at the end of that meeting, a mom came up to me and was very serious about, will my children have anything? Will they be able to do anything else except swim? I said, well, how old are they? And one was 10 and one was 12. I said, well, I had mentioned that the 10 and unders would do 3 days a week and maybe 3 or 4 for the other age. And I said, what do they do? Are they Boy Scouts? Are they into music? Is there something else that they're into? And this mom very seriously said to me, foliage. I want my kids to enjoy the foliage. So I said, well, I'm pretty sure there's at least a month and a half of that, if not more, that you can go in New England and see foliage. Anyway, she took her kids, and the end result was she never came back. She never came. So there were people on the team that wanted to be serious, and there were people on the team that if I can't do what I want to do when I want to do it, I'm probably not going to stick around.
Okay, you kind of bring up an interesting point. I hate to interrupt you, but you even I saw that at some points you thanked your parents for letting you do multiple sports, and this is something that club teams to this day still have to deal with. Especially, it feels like at least that specialization has become, the trendy or most important thing for kids at a very young age. How do you feel about that, and has it changed since back then?
No, for me, I think it is important. I think it's important for younger swimmers to try everything, to find out what they really like, what they're good at. Now, if they happen to be a swimmer and they want to play little league football, or they happen to be a swimmer and they want to, I'm in the play at school, then they need to do those things. But don't forget about swimming. Remember that you're coming in 3 days a week. Let's make sure we find a way to come in those 3 days a week. So we're very willing when they're younger to try to accommodate the other activities that they're doing. I think it's important that they do that. We did have one young lady who I thought was a very good swimmer, of course, and she got in my senior group, and I wanted her to commit to swimming, and I found out she was a pretty good softball player. And it turned out that she got a full scholarship for softball to college. Okay, good job. Who am I to say anything? That's where you should go. So, you have to find out what people really want to get into. But the philosophy is, and it's still the same today, that we do encourage other activities. Don't forget about swimming. We do want you to get through the groups. And I kind of feel like for longevity in the sport, if you're doing just swimming when you're a 10 and under, I think at some point as they get older, they start to want to do other things that they didn't get to do before. So do that early on instead. Teach your young kids to enjoy the sport, have fun with it, learn all the techniques and rules of the sport. And then as they get older, make more of a commitment.
Awesome. I'm glad we could fit that question in. Now we can continue, some of the time and space restraints from your early years at Seacoast. You even did an Ask a Talk at one point about it, coaching with limited time and space. Right. I think that's a challenge that a lot of teams deal with. Can you give us a little bit of a glimpse into that and what you prioritized at that point as the things that if this team's going to be successful, we have to do these things?
Right. So in the beginning, we only had Monday through Friday, and I wanted to make sure that we were getting enough background work. But the rec center, the recreation department would run swim lessons in the fall. And I remember one particular time that they said they were running them to mid-October and that we didn't have any pool time. So we literally ran dry land for 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and we ended up getting some pool time at the University of New Hampshire on the weekends. But I think what's important is if you only have an hour of time in the pool, you're going to have to make sure that you get everything you need during the week. So make sure there's something continuous going on in one practice, get your distance stuff done, get some endurance work done. And then on the other days, make sure that you're doing some details, some skill work, and certainly some speed work. So you only have what you have, but I think anybody can make anything work. As long as you're dedicated to it and you're doing it day after day, week after week in a season, I think you can make anything work. And I think that's the mindset you really have to have. You can't walk around saying, oh, woe is us, we don't have, a 50-meter pool, or we don't have, 2.5 hours to swim every day, or we don't have a weight room, or it doesn't really matter. You can make it work if you want to. And if you want to find a way, you can. It was very difficult getting long course time where we were during the course of the year. And I'll just fast forward real fast. When Jenny Thompson she was a qualifier for the World Championships in high school. And on Saturdays, we would drive all the way into Rhode Island to a public facility that was long course. And it was really about I want to say it was a 2.5 hour trip one way to get there. So I remember we would run morning practice, and then I'd say to a group of the junior and senior national kids, hey, we're going to go take this trip down, to Rhode Island. And so the first time we did it, we took one van full. And then the other kids in the program or the group were saying, hey, we'd like to take that trip too. And then at some point we had 3 full vans of swimmers traveling, and the commitment was amazing. I would meet them at noontime at the short course facility. We would drive down there, do the practice, have dinner as a group. And by the time we got home, it would be close to 9 p.m. So it was an amazing commitment to do that, but they all wanted to do that. And so it's great when everybody wants to get on board like that and be part of the program. But you do, to finish this part up, you do what you need to do to be the best you can be. We had a similar situation here in Minnesota. It was very difficult getting long course time. I wanted to make sure that Regan would keep in touch with long course training and that kind of stuff. So throughout the year, we might take these short 4-day trips and find some long course facility that we could go to. And we'd get 6 practices in those days. So we'd go, we'd get there on a Wednesday afternoon, have a Wednesday practice, double on Thursday and Friday, do a Saturday morning practice, and then head home for that, the rest of the weekend. But you do what you need to do. When meet results come out, it doesn't say at the end of it has your place and your name and your time. And at the end, it doesn't say, well, they didn't have any long course time, or they didn't have any dry land time, or they didn't have enough swim time. Nothing like that matters. You have to find a way to get it done. And again, that mindset is very important.
Yeah. Creates a lot of time too to, get to know the swimmers and for them to get to know you, especially when you're doing 2.5-hour van rides both ways and dinners with the team. I mean, it's kind of an awesome bonding opportunity. What do you think those swimmers would have said about you as a coach in those Seacoast days? Just giving us a view of, who you were on deck to them.
I would like to think that they would say that I challenged them to try to be the best they could be, and that I would try to help them as much as I could. So I would like to think that. I would like to think that the Riptide group thinks that as well, that I'm there to try to help them. And, doing something easy doesn't get the job done. I think you have to be challenged, and I think you have to accept that. So I would, again, I can't answer that question exactly, but I would say I would hope it would be that.
Can we dig into that a little bit? Just because, I've only been coaching for, 12, 13 years. And I feel like this generation, in order to challenge them, it almost requires their permission first, right? They have to kind of almost buy in to a certain degree before you can really challenge them. Can you talk about that approach to doing what you're supposed to do as a coach, and motivate and challenge and push them to a certain degree? How has that evolved from your time at Seacoast to now your time at Riptide?
I would agree. I would say that time back at Seacoast in the mid 80s, where there was no internet going on, there were no cell phones, there were no tablets or computers going on at that point. And I think that was the swimmers' one extracurricular activity outside of school. And most of their friends were there. We had double practices back at that time on Saturdays because it was very difficult for some of the kids during the week to come to the morning practices. So they would get together after the PM practice sometimes, and they'd have movie night. And I remember this one specific time. My wife and I had our first daughter was very young. And after that practice, I think I ended up going to the grocery store to grab some milk or whatever, some groceries. And when I came back to our apartment, all the cars were in the parking lot. I entered the apartment, and all these shoes were at the entranceway. And evidently that was movie night at our house. And there was popcorn all over the place. And then when I walked in, they all went, hi. I went, hi. So they did get together a lot more at that time. Your idea that the kids need, you have to have their permission. I think they do need to understand that they have to have some buy-in to working hard and being committed and being dedicated. Now, do I think everybody has that buy-in? Probably not. It's something that, you always want to improve your individual culture. You are always working on your team culture, your practice culture, whatever you want to call that. It's a work in progress all the time. It's not something that's just a done deal. For some kids, it is a done deal. But I think you have to keep working at it all the time, and they have to understand that consistency and hard work is part of the sport. You can't avoid that and think you're going to be better. So there's normally meetings about that or individual talks about that. And again, that's an ongoing thing, I think, throughout a season all the time.
Yeah. I find that it has to be something you remind them of. If it's important to them at the meet, when they want that time, it's got to be important to them consistently leading up to that. And
that's right.
I find myself having to remind them of that quite a bit. I love the story about the kids coming from movie night, but that's not really the only time that swimming comes home with you. I mean, being married to your co-head coach and, coaching with your wife for all these years, that makes it, a unique situation. I guess, how has coaching with your wife impacted your career first?
I, over the years, have loved coaching with Amy. As a matter of fact, we coach a junior group at Riptide together now. We've done so for the last 5 years. And I really enjoy working with Amy because, number one, she is way into the kids all the time, every minute of the practice. She's concerned about what they're doing and how things are being done. And she's always motivating and encouraging. At the end of the practice, there's always a little meeting before we do a little team cheer and they break to go home. But there's always that encouragement. And for that reason, I really love coaching with her. She's a great leader in that way. So we've never had I think at Seacoast for a number of years, it worked out this way. On the dry land days, I might be up in the weight room with the senior swimmers, and she was coaching the age group kids. When I moved down from the weight room to the pool for the swimming practice for the senior kids, she would move to the diving well, and she was a diving coach as well. She was an All-American diver in college, and she had her own diving program at Seacoast as well. And so we didn't necessarily always work together. We're in the same building. We're working with the same kind of kids, but we weren't necessarily working together at that point. We worked together on, swim team planning and swim meets and things like that. But there is never a time where I was like, oh, this is, we've been doing this too long. It's never been that way for us.
It's, and, from an outsider looking in, knowing how hard it is to find good coaches, knowing that you have one with you no matter where you go is also got to be a little bit of a benefit, right?
Absolutely. And one of the biggest benefits is this. We had a young lady that was at Seacoast when she was 7 years old. And I remember Amy telling me, oh, Mike, this girl's going to be really good one day. She's going to be good. And I'm like, well, in my mind, I coach kids that are in high school and stuff and older. And I'm like, well, 7 years old, anything can happen with a 7-year-old between now and then, But Amy was dead on about this young lady. She ended up, I think we practiced 3, maybe there was 4 times a week. It was 3 practices a week, and there was a stroke correction practice on Saturdays. So I'm going to say she practiced at the most about 4 hours a week. And when she was a 10 and under, she won all of her events at the LSC championship. When she was in the junior group, she made her first junior time before she got to the senior group. When she was in the senior group, she coming out her senior year, she was the top kid in the country in the 500,000 and 1650. And she had 3 Olympic trial times. So my wife was pretty right about that. Made it kind of easy for me. But if we've had other kids that come into the group, in my group, and if they're having an issue, say it's a technique issue, I always felt confident that I could send them back to Amy, the person who taught them how to do the technique and make any correction that they needed. And it was kind of like, it was just, remember this, remember that, and they'd come back and sure enough, everything would get back in order. So yeah, there is a big advantage to that. There's no doubt.
Sounds like it. How about on the personal side? It could be tough to draw boundaries between work and personal? Because you could come home and probably talk swimming all night, if you allowed that. Has there been any conscious, like, all right, we have to leave the pool here, or we can talk about it to a certain point and now we got to not talk about it? How do you kind of balance that piece?
Yeah, I'm not sure we've ever, there might have been for a while, one, let's draw the line at some point. Once we got home from swimming, that we wouldn't talk about swimming. But there's, no matter what, when you're running the program, and Amy likes to say that the swim team is like the farm. It's like a farm. The animals have to be fed every day. It doesn't matter if it's Christmas. It doesn't matter what day it is. You're still doing something. You're always working. But I think if there was a time, it would be, hey, later at night, let's sit on the couch and enjoy a little bit of time before it all starts again tomorrow. But for the most part, I don't remember talking too much about that. I just think it's, as coaches, it's a life that you choose, right? It's just kind of a way of life. And if you look at it for coaches, if you're a full-time coach and you look at the amount of time you put into being at the pool on a monthly basis, there might be 2 days a month that you're not at the pool. And those 2 days you're not at the pool, you're probably planning for what you're going to do at the pool the next time you're there. So, there's maybe 2 meets during that month. So that week, those weekends are taken up with swimming. And of course, you've trained through the whole week. And so there's especially at this time of year coming up here in February and March, almost every weekend is a meet. You accept that. That's part of the job. And I think you don't get to do it for a whole number of years unless you really like what you're doing.
Yeah. And it's a unique thing, not only for a spouse to understand it, but also share that passion. So, the farm analogy just kind of blew my mind a little bit. I think that sounds pretty awesome and accurate too. How did it impact you when your daughters came around and started going to the pool for practice, whether that was swimming or diving?
Right. Well, we're in this town, Dover, New Hampshire, and it's like, everybody knows your name there. You can walk into the post office and the bank and the supermarket and everybody, they wave to you, they know your name. It's literally that way. And when our first daughter was born, she was at the pool, I think 2 or 3 weeks. And after she was born, she was on a backpack with my wife, and my wife was coaching again. And she was just at the pool. Her name was Melissa. Melissa's at the pool with us all the time. And they just grow up around the pool. At some point when she became a little bit older and she was in middle school, a younger kid, maybe she was in, not even middle school, I take that back. She was probably in 1st or 2nd grade. And most of her buddies in her class had taken lessons and were maybe part of the swim team. And she actually had said to me at some point as a young kiddo, "Hey, Dad, everybody comes to the pool after school, right?" They sure do. So we knew everybody, but I think they were, it was part of their environment, right? They were just walking around the pool. They were always in a little suit. They both were on the swim team. And of course, our younger daughter ended up diving with my wife as well. And we can talk about that in a minute. But I think they really enjoyed it. I think all of their friends were on the swim team. To this day, they have great friends that they grew up with on the swim team. And I couldn't think of anything more positive about the life that we led there. And for that 26 years that we were at Seacoast, we made our life there. The gentleman that hired us, his name was Bob Parratto. We could never thank him enough for giving us a chance as young coaches to lead a program. And he had 3 sons on the team. And I remember when I first started attempting to talk people into going to morning practice, his 2 older sons were coming to the morning practice. I'm not sure they wanted to necessarily. I think he wanted to make sure that somebody was there. And there were a number of days when I would show up for the morning practice at that time, and I was the only one there, and I'd wait it out. and hope that somebody would come there, but it didn't happen all the time. But Bob was very instrumental in giving us permission to try to be the coaches and the team that we wanted to be. And again, I could never thank him enough for that opportunity. But our kids enjoyed it, and eventually our younger daughter Jessica got into diving with my wife, and we never thought about what level our kiddos were going to be. We just wanted them to enjoy the experience. I remember when Melissa was graduating, she only had 2 coaches before she went to college. All the way up to age 12, she had my wife, Amy. And then from 13 to graduating high school, she had me. And all I really wanted her to do was enjoy the experience in college. And she ended up getting into the University of Pennsylvania. There's a great coach there. His name is Mike Schnurr. And she got really lucky because that guy was a fun coach. They worked hard. And many of those swimmers, even at the Ivy League level, swam all 4 years. They enjoyed their experience. So she got lucky there for sure. And my daughter, Jessica, she swam all the way through 9th grade competitively. But during that time, she was also diving maybe once or twice a week. And she was just enjoying it. She was a gymnast as well. So going to diving maybe became a little bit easier or the same for her. But she got to work with her mom. And her mom taught her some really good stuff all the way to the age of 14. And I remember my wife coming over to me. I was obviously at the swimming pool end of the facility, and she walked up to me and she said, Jessica just did this dive and I think we're in trouble. I said, what do you mean? She says, well, she did this dive where she did a 1.5 and she kind of spun in place. And this is something that's hard to teach. And she got this right away. And we're like, oh, okay. So you're telling me she might be good? She says, yeah, I think she's going to be good. And she was right about that too. And Jessica ended up getting invited to the National Training Center as a freshman in high school. She went there, I think in February of her freshman year in high school. So she was 14. And she stayed with 2 host families there. So we were still in New Hampshire while she was in Indianapolis. That's where it was located at the NAT in Indianapolis. And at some point, our older daughter graduated, went to college, which was natural. And at some point, Amy went to live with Jess and help her with diving. And so I was home by myself. And at some point after so much time had gone by, and I kept asking the people at the training center, are you going to keep her in the program? I need to make a decision because I'd like to see my youngest daughter grow up like I did our oldest daughter. And they said, yeah, she's going to stay here. So we found a program, and after 26 years, we moved from New Hampshire.
Yeah, I mean, ultimate family story and kind of sacrifice to give up the amazing life that had given you so much out there in New Hampshire. But it worked out pretty well, as she not only made it in 2016 to the Olympic team, but also in 2021 to Tokyo. So yeah, your wife was right. She's good and
pretty good. She went to IU, was All-American there, won the platform 1 year, 3-time world championship diver, 2-time Olympian, and with their synchro partner, they ended up winning a silver medal last time.
Very special. It's very special to see it from that perspective as a father, and you have unique perspective, especially for a club coach, to see 2 of your swimmers go on to that kind of success in the pool, and 2 decades apart. You just don't hear that a lot. And I think it says a lot about you as a coach, but as swimmers, what do you think the common characteristics were that allowed them to be so successful? And maybe they share a characteristic with Jessica that you saw, even if, it wasn't in the racing pool, it was in the diving pool.
Right.
Are there common pieces between them?
Absolutely. And I think that the first common between Jenny and Regan is that there's a high level of intensity. These are swimmers that are willing to work hard. They want to be good. They want to make a commitment and are willing to do the things to be as good as they want it to be. Now, in terms of a little difference there, you could see that intensity with Jenny. There was nothing, she wasn't hiding anything. You could see that outwardly. Regan, a little bit different, a little bit more inward, but the intensity was just the same. Really great. If I had to pick an area about all three of them, so if you're talking about, and Jenny was a great inspiration for our daughter, Jessica. I mean, she got to grow up, Jessica did grow up around Jenny and witness that. And I think there was this motivation like, wow, she's a great swimmer. And I wonder one day if I could do that kind of thing. But that's something, and Jessica's been interviewed about that a few different times. But I think for the three of them, the one area that I would say is that they are all in on what they were doing. Jenny was going to be a great swimmer. She had that in her head. She was willing to work for it. We saw her compete. The first time my wife and I took her to a junior national meet, she was 12. She qualified for the 50 free. So when we got there, and we took her, and her brother qualified too, her brother Aaron, and we literally drove from Dover, New Hampshire to Tuscaloosa, Alabama for this junior national meet. It was in the summer, and it took us 2 days to get there. So Jenny was in the 50 free, her brother was in the 50 free. And we were there she's 12 years old. Let's just let her experience this meet. This will be a great thing for her to go through, and in the future will help her, right? That was my mindset about this. And so she is seated 77th in the 50 free. She just made the time a couple of weeks before that. And I think I told her, breathe here, breathe there. And I went up in the stands to sit with Amy, and we're just going to watch it. So as we're watching the heats go by, and she's coming up in a heat or two, she start playing with her goggles and stretching and doing all these things that we had never seen her do before. And we looked at each other and said, "Are you watching this?" Yeah. All of a sudden, there was this amazing seriousness. And she got up and she swam and ended up 7th from 77. So she finaled. And so on on the final, of course, now I'm back on the pool deck. And she ended up, I think she ended up 6th. She had a senior national time. And I looked at my wife and I said, we better not mess this up because she's pretty good. It's hard to mess up Jenny. So anyway, we start making plans. And one of my plans for Jenny was, hey, we're going to go to junior nationals because you have the one event. I'm not going to take you to seniors yet. And you have to make 3 times unrested and unshaved to go. So I kind of put that carrot out there. So the training and the process was important. And sure enough, that next season, she made 3 events. They were about 50 free, 100 free, and the 100 back, I believe. And the next year I said, all right, now we got to make a couple. I'd say now we got to work on the 200, and she made the 200. So the first year, I think she was 15. We went to senior nationals. When she was 14, she went to her first senior national meet, ended up 2nd place in the 50 to Dara Torres, and she was the rookie of the meet at that time when they had that award. And the next year, we worked on the 200 free, and we were in LA. And I think she had this relatively slow time in the 200 free. She was like a 2:11 long course, right? So I said, look, we got to work on this event. That's going to be part of the events that you'll do. And she ended up barely making, I think we went to Montreal for a meet. She went 2:08. I went, oh, that's good. Some progress in season. And she barely made the time at our local LSC meet. And she wasn't shaved or rested or anything. So I said, all right, this is very good. So she went to the nationals that summer and she went 2:02 and she finaled. That was the final time at that time. It was 1989, and it qualified her to go to Tokyo for the Pan Pacific Games. So that was really great. that was great. So the intensity is there. And then, in
Was
terms
that
of
her
Regan,
first international team? Sorry to interrupt. Was that the first time she made an international team and it was in the 200?
no. First international team when she was 14, she made the Pan Ams.
Got it.
And that was the summer before.
In the 50?
In the 50 and the 100. She actually won the gold medal in the 50 against the two great sisters from Costa Rica. I'm drawing a blank on right now. And Sylvia and Claudia Pohl. And Sylvia was the star of that meet at the Pan Ams that year. And I think Jenny got a bronze medal in the 100 at that meet, and she won the 50 and beat Sylvia Pohl there. But that was the next year. Then she ended up making the 200 free and swam the 50 and the 100 there as well. Regan's first big splash was when she came to our team. She was 13. She had just turned 13, and decided to take her to the junior national meet. And that was the first year that they had the futures meets that came out. And you weren't allowed, if you had an Olympic trial time at that time, you weren't allowed to compete at the futures meet, which I thought was a shame because we had 9 or 10 other kids that were in that meet that qualified. And so she wouldn't get to swim with her teammates. She had to go with the old guy to the junior meet in San Antonio. And my wife took the other ones to, I think it ended up at Purdue for that first futures championship. So anyway, when we got there, she's 13. I think she swam the 100 fly, did okay, maybe right around her time. She finaled in the 200 back, but maybe not as fast as she did to get there. And then it was the 100 back, was her last event there. And she finaled, and I think she was seated third, maybe fourth, third or fourth. I want to say third going into the final. And my thought process was, all right, we talked about the race a little bit and, hey, let's see what happens here. Again, it's the same observation, thought process I had about Jenny. Let's see what happens here. And there was no fear. She was first at the 50. Sam Kendricks was doing the announcing. It was always fun to hear Sam. And he says, that's Regan Smith from Riptide, and she's out, And she ended up second, but she's 13 years old, and I thought to myself, there's no doubt she's the real deal. Let's not mess this up either. So,
does it take a competition to tell if they're the real deal? I mean, it's something
I think that absolutely. Oh yeah, I think competition just raises their level even more. For Jenny and Regan, I absolutely believe that's true. And in terms of the all-in comment, and just recently, last month or so, Jessica decided, she got a call from her synchro partner from the Olympics. Jessica was kind of staying in shape. She was diving a couple of days a week, but pretty much 1 or 3 meter, springboard, no platform. She hadn't done platform since the Olympics. She got one call from her synchro partner, said, hey, do you think you want to do this again? And that's all it took. So she's now in training again. She's back at IU. She's kind of getting in shape again for it. And then she's going to end up in Arizona where her synchro partner is, Delaney Schnell. And she's trying this again. So I think if you're going to do something and you're that level, the only thing you could possibly think of is, I need to be all in to do this. And so the only thing about that is that she gave up her job because diving takes up a lot of training time. But I understand. But you understand that I think from my wife and my perspective, this is really an amazing thing. I guess do it while you can.
Absolutely. You only get so many chances to be at that level of greatness in your life. And a lot of people don't even get that chance. Even if they're all in, there's got to be some other swimmers who you've seen that are all in.
Oh, absolutely.
And, just didn't make it to that level. And I guess we kind of already alluded to it. It's just that instinct in the races themselves. Are there any other differences that you saw in the 3 Olympians in your life that kind of separate them from the other people who are just as committed and probably as passionate? I mean,
there's no doubt we've had Olympic trial swimmers over the years, in addition to Jenny and Regan, for sure. Um, I guess if we were capable of putting a percentage on everything, then it might be easier to figure out, but it's hard to do so, right? Here's your ability level. Here's your work ethic. Here's your commitment level, blah, blah, blah. There's so many different factors, right? Here are your parents. What do you get from that? And here's the coaching that you've received at this level and at this level. There's so many different factors that are involved. But for them, I think it was this high desire to try to be the best they could be. I actively talked to Jenny before she went to Stanford about breaking the world record. That was an East German, I believe, tainted world record. And I said, it doesn't matter, you're going to be able to break that record one day. And sure enough, that happened. I saw in Regan that same ability. She has a very high pride level in her training. Her training is important to her. She wants to be successful with her training. And there are some moments in training that I thought, this young lady is going to break the American record in the 200-yard back. And then a little while later, she can break the world record in long course. So those things were definitely thoughts in my head about them, and they went out and accomplished that.
How does that level swimmer change your coaching? I mean, is it possible to keep your training philosophy the same? I mean, what kind of impact does it have first? I mean, it's got to impact a lot of different areas, but first, just your day-to-day training philosophy. How does it change when you have that level of athlete in the water every day?
Yeah, I think, in Jenny's case, we had a lot of young ladies that were senior national level like her. We had senior national guys. Training together was a real big positive thing for them. That really worked out. But earlier I said that I think it's important that you challenge swimmers. When you have that level of swimmer in your program, they challenge you back. They challenge the coach, in my case, to come back to the training pool with the proper challenges that they need to become the swimmer that they want to be. So, I would think of these training sets and say, okay, how close can I, without being absolutely ridiculous, right? How close can I get her to have a breakthrough today without making the set ridiculous? I mean, you can think of something where there's going to be failure, but that's not the point here. The point is to be successful doing the most challenging thing that you've done up to that date. And there are a lot of let's get under swims, get under this time, again and again and again. And
can you give us some examples?
Oh yeah, I mean there is a set, and you know how the pro meets go, right? In Regan's case, she's a great flyer in backstroke, and she would swim on one day. She might swim the 200 back and then the 100 fly. Another day she might swim the 200 fly and then the 100 back, right? And I remember going out to California where were we? Santa Clara. And she had literally 10 to 12 minutes between these events. So I said, I started to think of sets that would help her handle that situation, right? So I have this set. The set was initially going to be 5 times around, and it was a 650s fly, followed by a 150 back kick. This is in a short course pool, and with a get under time of maybe it was 150 at the time, and then a 250 backstroke for time, right? And we're going to do that 5 times. So we went, and I was looking for her to be as close to 230 or maybe under 230 in the 250 back. So in the first 3 rounds, I think she's 234, 235. The butterflies were challenging as well, right? The butterfly 50s. So we get to the fourth, we get through 4 rounds actually, and I think she got down to 233. And I said, I said, look, on the 5th round, we're not going to do the 50s fly. We're not going to do the kick. We're just going to go a 200 back for time. So we're going to get rid of the 5th round. And so we got rid of the 5th round. I gave her a minute before we did it. And she went 157 in the 200 back from a push at the end of that practice. And I said, that's what I was looking for. And that she was very capable of hitting those kind of swims in practice. A few years down the line, I believe maybe her best push time in a 200-yard back was 153. She's been 51 high, 51 plus in the 100 back in practice. These are more than signs of, I think she might be good. These are signs of, hey, I think she can break a world record.
But it takes some, like you said, I really appreciated what you said about setting them up to be successful at that level where they don't know for sure if they can get it, but maybe they can, and not beyond where you might break them. You might break them and convince them otherwise, or even putting them up to that challenge on a day where they've had some cumulative fatigue or something happen outside the pool that keeps them in a different place.
And that absolutely happens.
Specific planning as a coach, right?
That does happen. And there's those days where their fatigue is there. And some days there isn't that great success. But if the effort is there, there's still something that you're gaining, right? But I remember we do this set where we kind of do, we'll call it random sprinting. And we just kind of do all these very short things all the time. And I'll just do them off the top of my head. And we might do that for an hour. And one time we were in Colorado Springs, and this was after, well, I'll talk about right before she set the world record in 2019. We were in Florida doing a training trip, and we had an AM practice that was pretty challenging. I think it was 8,000 meters in the morning, and I believe that it was a pretty hard freestyle set. So in the afternoon, we came back, and it was a short afternoon, and we did a short warm-up, and the set was 5 rounds where you do 2 100s for time and a 200 pull, just distance per stroke. And I said to Regan, let's do the odd rounds backstroke. All right, let's do the odd rounds back. You can do whatever strokes you want on the even rounds for the 100s. And the 100s were on, it was a good interval. It was on 150. So this wasn't a tight interval. And if I remember right, the first 2 100 backs were 104s. The next 2 were 103s, and the last 2 were 102s. And I thought, wow, that I'm not sure there's too many people out there doing that, anyway, I remember she went to the camp, and Greg Regan was her group coach, and he had texted me saying, Mike, she's pushing 102 for her back. I said, that's good, let her do that. That's what she's been doing. And then of course she got to that meet and crushed the 200 back and the 100 back, of course, and just had great swims there. Back later that fall, after the world records, we went to the Colorado Springs, and we did that same kind of little set. And at the end of a practice there at altitude, she pushed a 101, 100 meter back. And again, I think you have to find ways to get there, right? And it's a great combination of, how much endurance work are you doing? How much speed work are you doing? How much do the details matter underwater? Your kick counts and your stroke counts and all those things like that. And I think Regan has a pride in that. I think that matters to her, and that she trains well, because she knows that if she keeps training well over a period of time, that process is going to yield some very good results.
Was the process different, the details, the, percentages in the equation when you had to account for a 50 freestyle with Jenny?
Jenny loved the 50 free. So her set, I can give you a set that she did.
Yes, please.
By the way, it didn't matter how much I gave Jenny. At any time, she could get up and really knock out an amazingly fast 50 free. And I remember this one time at the end of a long course practice, our best guy on the team says to Jenny, hey, I'll race you in a 50. I said to him, I don't know if you want to do that. So she said, do you want to race me in a 50? And he's an incredibly hard worker, so I'm pretty sure he was dead from the training. However, she beat him by body length, I think. And anyway, the set that I think that we're talking about in terms of detail is on a Saturday afternoon, we would do stroke lanes, and her set, this is a meat and potato set of 8 100s from the block. There was a breath control requirement, and she had to, not breathe here or there, in and out of walls. The first so many strokes, the last so many strokes to the finish. And then she had a goal time. And if she missed any of those parameters, then that swim didn't count towards the 8 100s. Okay. And she probably had to do 100 easy or 150 easy after each one. And I think we went every 6 or 7 minutes. So inevitably, she might miss the first one. And I'd say, oh, you didn't make the time standard. Like, good job on the breath control. So I think that would motivate her a little bit. And then she made the next 8 in a row. And she was going amazingly fast. And every wall and every finish was the correct number of strokes and the correct breath control. So I think, like anything else, you have to plan it out. That way, when I watch Katie Ledecky swim a 1500, Katie takes the same number of strokes every single 50 through the entire 1500. She could probably swim that with her eyes closed and do the flip turn and not worry about her feet, where they're going to land on the wall. Same number of dolphin kicks, breakout, 40 strokes or 20 cycles every time. And I think that's important for any race that you do. So if it's the 50 free, and you're Jenny Thompson, you got to know the number of strokes. You got to know if and when you're taking a breath. When she was in high school, I had a coach from another team say, I want my group to watch Jenny swim the 50. How many breaths is she going to take? I said, well, she might take one up and one back, or she might just take one on the second 25. It's a 50-yard free. And so she swam the 50 and she didn't take any breaths, which we had been working on. So he came over to me after she swam. He says, I thought she was going to take a breath. I said, yeah, I thought so too. Evidently, we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating for me to hear. And, I feel like you said it from the beginning with Jenny as a 12-year-old, I better not mess this up. And there's just something that's there that was, a decision that she had made, but the opportunities that you presented her with and the details that she was challenged with. And I always say this to my swimmers, like, I can't change you. I can just give you the opportunity. And it seems like that really was a catalyst to their paths. But at the same time, they have that it factor or they don't, right?
That and they're just highly motivated.
Yeah.
Both highly motivated. If I'm speaking about my daughter, Jessica, or any of them, there are some things that are just unacceptable. All right. They know that that's not them. And they're going to come back and be that much better the next time they train. So highly motivated people, for sure. And with the ability to do great things.
Awesome. I really appreciate that insight. And I think the listeners will too. Let's transition. Just got a couple questions left. I thank you so much for your time here. I think it's important for coaches to also hear from other coaches things that they do away from the pool. What activities do you enjoy doing that don't have anything to do with swimming?
Well, I'll talk about my wife first, and then I'll get to me. My wife is amazing. Amy can go and swim masters. She can swim at the pool. She can coach at the pool. She's our meet director for our club. She spends an enormous amount of time at the pool. I am amazed at that. I need to get away from the pool. One day when I retire and I'm not a coach, I will go back and swim in the pool. I will enjoy it. But right now, for me, I just can't do that. So the only thing from my perspective is I just need to get away from the pool and enjoy my time away. I enjoy sports. I watch a lot of sports. I like to read. I like to watch videos. That's it for me, though. And I probably should exercise a little bit more than
That's
I
fair.
do.
I think that's a good message.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
probably should do more of that.
But yeah, there's got to be other things to kind of make sure that there is some kind of balance. So, Mike, I really appreciate your time here. I know we went a little over an hour, but I think that it was well worth it. Some amazing stories, some awesome insight from one of the best who's ever done it. So thank you. I know I learned a lot, and we appreciate your time. Best of luck here moving forward.
Thank you. Best of luck to you, and thank you, Garrett. I really did enjoy it.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam Podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam Podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.